Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Imagine walking into a doctor's office with severe, agonizing pain, only to be told the cure is just losing a few pounds. No blood work, no scans, just a generic diet pamphlet and a door shut in your face. This is the reality for thousands of people every day. Today, we're breaking down the story of Nora and Dr. Vance, a case study in how medical bias almost cost a patient her life, and how she fought back to expose a broken system. Let's start with Chapter 1. The fluorescent lights of the exam room buzzed with a low, relentless hum that vibrated straight through Nora's skull. She sat on the edge of the examination table, the paper beneath her crinkling with every shallow breath. Her hands were pressed tightly against the right side of her abdomen, where a deep, burning pain had been growing for 3 weeks, leaving her nauseous and constantly exhausted. When the door finally clicked open, Dr. Vance walked in without making eye contact. He flicked through his tablet, his thumb scrolling past her chart before he even reached the stool. "So, Nora," he said, setting the tablet down with a soft tap, "looks like we're back again. What's going on?" "The pain in my stomach is getting worse. It's sharp, especially after I eat, and the fatigue is so bad I can barely finish a workday. I really think something is wrong." Dr. Vance sighed, leaning back and resting his hands over his midsection. He didn't pick up his stethoscope. He didn't ask her to lie back so he could palpate her abdomen. He just looked her up and down, his gaze lingering on her waistline. "Nora, at your weight, the body carries a lot of extra strain. Abdominal discomfort, low energy, these are textbook side effects of carrying excessive pounds. Your body is telling you it's overwhelmed." "I know my body," Nora pushed back gently, swallowing her rising frustration. "This isn't just being tired. It's a localized, stabbing pain." Dr. Vance reached into a drawer, pulled out a glossy, pre-printed brochure titled Healthy Living at Every Step, and slid it across the counter. "Let's hold off on unnecessary tests for now. Commit to 1,200 calories a day and 30 minutes of light cardio. Come back in 2 months when the scale drops." The paper brochure sat on Nora's kitchen counter like a silent accusation. Every time she walked past Healthy Living at Every Step, a fresh wave of frustration washed over her. But Dr. Vance was the professional with a medical degree framed on his wall. If he believed her body was simply protesting its own weight, maybe she just needed to prove she was trying. For the next 3 weeks, Nora followed his instructions to the letter. She downloaded a tracking app, logging every leaf of spinach and every spoonful of broth, capping her daily intake strictly at 1,200 calories. Every morning, despite the deep, gnawing pain in her side, she forced herself onto the treadmill. Each step sent a sharp, agonizing jolt through her right flank, but she clenched her teeth and kept moving. "It's just muscle soreness," she told herself, repeating Dr. Vance's implicit promise. It gets worse before it gets better. Except it didn't get better. By week 4, the burning pain had transformed into a raw, throbbing pressure that radiated straight through to her back. Nausea hit her in heavy, unpredictable waves, making the thought of even her modest meals unbearable. Her fatigue was no longer just feeling tired. It felt like her blood had been replaced with wet cement. Hand shaking, Nora dialed the clinic. When the line connected, she explained to the triage nurse that the pain had intensified significantly despite strictly following the doctor's plan. There was a brief pause, followed by the soft clacking of keys. "I'm looking at Dr. Vance's notes from your last visit," the nurse said, her voice smooth, polite, and completely detached. He emphasized that lifestyle modifications take time to show results. Your body is adjusting to a new routine.
"You don't understand," Nora begged, gripping the edge of the counter. "I can barely stand up straight today. Please, can I just get an ultrasound or blood work?" Dr. Vance felt diagnostic testing wasn't indicated at this stage. "Give the lifestyle changes time, Nora. Drink plenty of water and stick to the program." The line went dead, leaving Nora alone in her quiet kitchen with the growing, unaddressed fire inside her. 2 weeks later, Nora shuffled into the clinic's exam room, her hand pressed firmly against her ribs. She was 4 pounds lighter, mostly from the constant nausea, and visibly exhausted, with dark circles bruised under her eyes. Every step felt like walking through deep mud, but she had forced herself to attend this follow-up, desperate for a shift in Dr. Vance's approach. Dr. Vance walked in, glancing at the chart on his tablet. He raised an eyebrow, looking down at her through his wire-rimmed glasses. "Well, Nora, the scale says you've lost 4 pounds in 6 weeks, he said, setting the tablet down. "Given the calorie intake we discussed, that number should be twice as high. Are you tracking every single bite?" Nora blinked, stunned. "Dr. Vance, I'm logging everything. I'm staying under 1,200 calories a day. But the pain, it's getting worse. It's a severe, localized throbbing right under my rib cage, and it's spreading to my back. I can barely sleep." Dr. Vance folded his arms, leaning against the counter. A tight, skeptical smile touched his lips. "Nora, human biology is straightforward. Energy in, energy out. When patients don't see expected progress, it's almost always due to underreporting, mindless snacking, portion sizes being larger than realized. It's very common." "I am not lying to you," Nora said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and physical agony. "I'm in real pain. It isn't muscle soreness from walking. Please, just order an ultrasound or basic blood work." He held up a hand, cutting her off. "I'm not going to order costly, unnecessary imaging to validate lifestyle discomfort. Blood work won't fix a lack of compliance, Nora. You need to be honest with yourself about your diet. Go home, reset, and let's see some real commitment before our next visit." Before she could speak again, he grabbed his tablet and walked out, leaving her alone in the cold room with the unbearable ache in her side. The quiet in Nora's apartment felt heavier than ever before. In the weeks following her visit with Dr. Vance, the pain became a constant, cruel companion, but the shame that came with it was far worse. Mindless snacking, lack of compliance, unnecessary imaging. His words echoed through her mind on loop every time she lay curled on her side, clutching a heating pad against her ribs. Dr. Vance was a respected physician with decades of experience. If he was so certain that her agony was just the natural consequence of her weight and a lack of willpower, who was she to argue? Slowly, insidious self-doubt took root. Nora began to second-guess her own senses. When the stabbing heat flared beneath her ribs, she wondered if she was exaggerating it in her head, if she was just weak, looking for an easy excuse for her physical failures. Maybe everyone felt this way when they tried to change, and she was simply too brittle to handle it. The isolation set in swiftly. When her friends invited her out for dinner or weekend walks, she declined, terrified of having to explain why she could barely eat or keep up. She stopped answering texts, ashamed to admit that she was spending her evenings in bed weeping quietly into her pillow. She couldn't bear to hear another well-meaning person tell her to listen to her doctor. Deep down, Nora knew something inside her was terribly, dangerously wrong. But squeezed between the agony in her abdomen and the absolute authority of the medical system, she stopped calling the clinic. She stopped asking for help. She surrendered to the dark, quiet space of her bedroom, waiting for a body she no longer trusted
to fix itself.
Tuesday morning started like every other day that month, with a dull, throbbing heat beneath Nora's right rib cage. But by noon, as she sat at her desk staring blankly at her computer screen, the dull ache fractured into a blinding, searing pain. It hit her like a physical blow. Nora gasped, doubling over her desk and knocking her mug to the floor, where it shattered against the thin carpet. Cold sweat broke out across her forehead, but her skin felt like it was on fire. "Nora, are you okay?" a coworker called out, stepping into her cubicle. Nora couldn't answer. She tried to take a breath, but inhaling felt like thrusting a blade straight into her side. Trembling, she forced herself to stand, intending to reach the bathroom, but her knees buckled instantly. As she hit the floor, her vision blurred and narrowed into a dark tunnel. Her coworker screamed for help, the office noise swelling into a chaotic blur of panicked voices, running footsteps, and someone shouting to call 911. Through the haze, Nora caught a glimpse of her own hand gripping the carpet. Her skin had taken on a sickening pale yellow tint. Her fever was spiking so fast that shivering racked her entire body, sending wave after wave of agony through her swollen abdomen. "Hang in there, Nora, the ambulance is on its way." When the paramedics burst through the office doors minutes later, they found her curled in a fetal position, semi-conscious, skin burning and jaundiced. They didn't ask about her diet. They didn't check her BMI. They strapped her onto a gurney, hooked up an IV, and rushed her toward St. Jude's Emergency Department, a hospital miles away from Dr. Vance's clinic.
The harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room rushed overhead in a blur as the paramedics wheeled Nora into a trauma bay. She was barely coherent, her teeth chattering from a skyrocketing fever, her eyes yellowed and unfocused against the blinding white ceiling. 28-year-old female, severe acute right upper quadrant pain, febrile at 103.2, visibly jaundiced, the paramedics shouted over the noise of the bustling department. An attending physician, Dr. Reyes, moved directly to Nora's bedside. She didn't look at a chart or ask about Nora's history first. She looked straight at Nora's face. "Nora, I'm Dr. Reyes," she said calmly, placing a warm, steady hand on Nora's shoulder. "I know you're in excruciating pain. I'm going to take a quick look at your abdomen, okay?" Nora could only manage a faint nod. Dr. Reyes gently pressed her fingertips against the upper right side of Nora's belly. The moment her hand made contact, Nora cried out, her entire body tensing in agony. Dr. Reyes immediately pulled her hand back, her face hardening with instant recognition. "Murphy's sign is overwhelmingly positive," Dr. Reyes called out to the nurse. "Get an IV pain med in her right now, order a full lab panel including liver enzymes, and wheel the bed straight into the bedside ultrasound suite. Move." Within 15 minutes of arriving, Nora was laying in the darkened ultrasound room. Dr. Reyes applied the cold gel and placed the transducer on Nora's side. On the black and white screen, the diagnosis was undeniable. "There it is," Dr. Reyes said softly, anger underlying her tone. "Severely distended gallbladder, thickened walls, massive pericholecystic fluid, and completely packed with gallstones. One is jammed right in the common bile duct." She looked down at Nora, her expression turning deeply empathetic. "Nora, your gallbladder is severely infected and obstructed. You've had a chronic issue here that has reached a critical acute crisis. You need emergency surgery immediately." Tears trickled down Nora's jaundiced cheeks, not from the pain, but from the sudden, overwhelming realization that she had been right all along.
The prep for the emergency cholecystectomy was a swift, coordinated blur. Within 30 minutes of the ultrasound, Nora was being wheeled into the cold, sterile operating room. The surgical team moved with practiced efficiency, attaching monitors and hanging IV bags, while the surgeon, Dr. Lin, stood at her side. "Nora, we're going to remove your gallbladder right away," Dr. Lin said softly, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. "It's severely inflamed and dangerously close to rupturing, but you are in good hands now. We're taking care of you." Nora nodded faintly behind her oxygen mask as the anesthesiologist injected the sedative. As the heavy darkness pulled her under, her last thought wasn't fear of the surgery, but relief that someone had finally taken action. Hours later, Nora woke up in the post-anesthesia care unit. Her body felt sore and battered, but the sharp stabbing fire that had haunted her right side for months was completely gone. Dr. Lin walked into the recovery bay shortly after, pulling up a stool beside her bed. His expression was serious as he looked at her. "Nora, the surgery was a success, but I need to be frank with you." He leaned in. "Your gallbladder was in terrible shape. It was swollen to 3 times its normal size, heavily scarred from months of chronic inflammation, and on the absolute verge of wall necrosis and perforation. If you had waited even another day or two, you would have been facing severe peritonitis and sepsis." He paused, shaking his head slightly. "A simple abdominal ultrasound, or even basic blood work months ago when your symptoms started, would have caught this easily before it became a life-threatening emergency. It boggles my mind how a primary care physician could miss a textbook case of severe gallstone disease." Nora closed her eyes, letting Dr. Lin's words wash over her. The physical poison inside her body had been cut out, but the emotional scars left by Dr. Vance were only just beginning to show.
2 days later, resting in her quiet hospital room at St. Jude's, Nora opened her laptop. Her body was recovering smoothly, but a cold, sharp anchor had replaced the self-doubt that plagued her for months. She logged in to Dr. Vance's clinic portal and submitted a formal request for her complete medical records, including all clinical notes from her visits over the past 6 months. An hour later, the PDF file hit her inbox. Nora opened the document, scrolling past her basic demographics until she reached the clinical narrative notes written by Dr. Vance himself. As her eyes scanned the text, her jaw tightened in disbelief. Patient returns with ongoing complaints of generalized abdominal discomfort. Re-educated patient on the physiological consequences of severe obesity. Discussed dietary noncompliance and poor caloric tracking. Patient exhibits emotional distress secondary to lack of weight loss success. Advised strict adherence to 1,200-calorie regimen and daily physical activity. Diagnostic imaging declined as symptoms are consistent with wheat-related strain. Not once in 3 separate entries had Dr. Vance recorded the exact location of her pain. Not once had he noted her descriptions of severe nausea, back radiation, or deep localized throbbing beneath her right rib cage. He had systematically stripped her physical reality from her chart, replacing her acute medical symptoms with a narrative of lazy, dishonest failure. He hadn't just misdiagnosed her, he had deliberately rewritten her medical history to cover his own bias. Nora printed every single page. Beside Dr. Vance's notes, she placed her St. Jude's emergency admission records, Dr. Reyes's ultrasound report detailing the chronic gallstone disease, and Dr. Lin's pathology report confirming severe tissue necrosis. The paper trail was undeniable. Dr. Vance's refusal to investigate had almost killed her, and now she held the proof right in her hands.
Nora sat at her dining table, 3 weeks post-surgery, with 2 thick folders laid out before her. To her left was Dr. Vance's paper trail of systemic dismissal. To her right were the discharge summaries, surgical photos, and pathology reports from St. Jude's emergency department.
For months, Dr. Vance had made her feel powerless, but as she lined up the dates, matching his notes claiming dietary noncompliance with the hospital reports confirming months of chronic gallstone accumulation, the fear that had kept her quiet evaporated entirely. She opened a blank document on her laptop and began drafting a formal, detailed complaint addressed directly to the State Medical Board and the hospital's Medical Ethics and Risk Management Board. Nora didn't write an emotional plea. She wrote a clinical breakdown. She cited every date, every symptom reported, and every refusal to order basic diagnostic testing. She attached Dr. Lin's post-operative notes as direct evidence that a simple, non-invasive ultrasound, a standard procedure for right upper quadrant abdominal pain, would have prevented an emergency surgical crisis. When she finished the letter, she drove to her old clinic in person. Instead of asking to see Dr. Vance, she requested a direct meeting with the practice administrator. In the quiet office, Nora laid the packet of documents on the desk between them. The administrator skimmed the first few pages, her polite professional posture instantly stiffening as she read Dr. Lin's pathology summary alongside Dr. Vance's entries. "Nora," the administrator began, her voice dropping into a tense tone reserved for legal liability. "I am so sorry for what you experienced." "I am not here for an apology," Nora said, her voice steady and completely devoid of tremor. "I am here to ensure that Dr. Vance's habit of replacing patients' symptoms with his own prejudice is formally investigated. These copies are going to the medical board today." She stood up, leaving the file on the desk, and walked out of the clinic without looking back. 6 months later, Nora sat in a sunlit exam room at a new primary care clinic. The room felt entirely different. No cold hum of fluorescent lights, no anxious tightness in her chest. Her new doctor, Dr. Patel, sat across from her. There were no tablets held up like barriers, no pre-printed diet pamphlets on the counter. During their very first appointment months ago, Dr. Patel had reviewed Nora's history, acknowledged the severe trauma of her near rupture, and stated clearly, "Your weight is a data point, not a diagnosis. I listen to what your body is telling us." That weight-neutral, evidence-based approach had transformed Nora's relationship with healthcare. Her incision scars had faded to faint silver lines. Her energy had returned, and for the first time in years, she felt safe inside her own skin. Later that afternoon, Nora stood in front of a podium in a university auditorium, addressing a room packed with medical students and resident physicians. Invited by a patient advocacy network, she stood beside a large screen displaying 2 documents side by side. Dr. Vance's clinical notes blaming her agony on lack of compliance, and the pathology report showing her necrotic, stone-filled gallbladder. "Bias in medicine isn't just uncomfortable," Nora said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "It is dangerous. When a doctor looks at a patient and sees a weight instead of a human being in pain, diagnostic errors happen, and sometimes those errors are nearly fatal." The audience was dead silent, every eye fixed on the stark contrast between the 2 medical records on the screen. Following her complaint, the State Medical Board had launched a formal inquiry into Dr. Vance's practice, mandating implicit bias training and placing a permanent record of negligence on his file. But for Nora, true justice wasn't just holding one doctor accountable. It was ensuring that future doctors learned to listen. Nora looked out at the rows of future physicians, stepping away from the podium with a quiet, unshakable confidence. She had reclaimed her body, her voice, and her story, and no one would ever take them away again.
Nora's story ended in accountability, but for far too many patients, medical bias goes completely unchecked. If you've ever had a doctor dismiss your symptoms, make sure to drop your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else realize they aren't alone. If this video opened your eyes, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into patient advocacy and healthcare reform. You can find the vocabulary of the story down below in the description box. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and always advocate for your health. I'll see you in the next story. Goodbye.